Okay, let's unpack this. $6.6 billion. That's how much users spent on OnlyFans in 2023 alone.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, put that in perspective. That's more than the combined salaries. NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, all of
That's
them.
staggering, really.
And here's something surprising. Its early growth, OnlyFans, actually outpaced giants like Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, that's not something most people realize.
Exactly. So we've all heard the name, right? But today we're doing a deep dive, trying to understand what's really happening on OnlyFans.
And I think what's key here is moving beyond just, the surface level. Most people have a vague idea, but the reality, well, it has some really significant layers,
Yeah.
implications too.
Right. So for this deep dive, we're looking past the headlines. Back in 2016, the original concept for OnlyFans, it was actually pretty interesting. Sort of a way to give creators, in different fields, think musicians, artists, maybe someone sharing baking recipes,
All sorts.
a direct line to their fans, let them monetize content behind a paywall. Seemed logical, right? An evolution for online creation.
It did seem logical. The idea was, fostering these niche communities, creators get exclusive stuff out, engage directly with supporters, and importantly, get a more direct revenue stream than just relying on ads or those big platform algorithms.
But as we know, the platform, well, it took a sharp turn. Today, the huge majority of content on OnlyFans is adult. Estimates are like 80, maybe even up to 98%.
Which really just highlights how user demand, market forces, they can totally reshape a platform, sometimes really far from the original plan.
Yeah. So to help us really get inside this, understand the workings, the broader implications, we have a really insightful voice with us today. She's a former OnlyFans recruiter, worked inside an agency, and importantly, her perspective has evolved. She's now dedicated to helping young women understand their worth. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Your firsthand journey, I mean, from being right in the thick of it to now offering guidance, a different view, that gives you incredible insight.
I hope so. It's definitely a complex landscape.
Absolutely. So let's start with your background, if you don't mind. You're an Australian business consultant, background in startups, marketing. How did you first even encounter OnlyFans? What was your initial take?
Yeah, so born and raised Melbourne. Background is business building, marketing, that sort of thing. When I first heard about OnlyFans, I was actually working crazy long hours in hospitality. Completely different world. A friend, actually an ex-criminal defense lawyer, he'd started an OnlyFans agency. He saw issues with existing agencies, knew I had a business background, asked if I'd help him get it going. Honestly, my initial view was pretty naive. I had heard the name, thrown around. Just thought, okay, platform, people control their content, earn money direct from fans. Simple. Knew a few people who seemed to be doing okay financially from it, so I just assumed. Well, assumed it was a positive thing overall. This idea of creators being empowered.
That initial perception, it sounds like a common starting point, right?
Yeah.
Empowering, straightforward money. But as we'll dig into, it often doesn't capture the full picture.
Not usually, no.
Okay, so maybe just set the scene for anyone listening who isn't totally familiar. Beyond the huge money, what does OnlyFans actually look like today? How does it work? Because it's not mostly live webcamming, is it?
No, that's a really key distinction. It's not primarily live streaming like some might think. From my experience, what I saw in the agency, it's mostly pay-per-view content, exchanged within direct messages, and also this thing called the content vault.
Content vault.
Yeah, think of it like a creator's library, kind of like an Instagram feed, but behind the paywall. But the real engagement, the big money generation that happens in the private messages. Creators are constantly sending out individual pay-per-view messages, often with free little teasers. And that content also lives in their vault for subscribers. That's where users spend a lot of time, where that sort of personalized interaction happens.
Okay, so the key isn't just passive watching. It's this feeling, the sense of individual attention, like a direct connection, almost one-on-one. That seems to be the draw.
Exactly. That feeling of connection is huge.
And this quote really hit me. While traditional entertainment sells distraction, OnlyFans has perfected the monetization of being seen. Personalized intimacy, even in its most manufactured form, is now more valuable than almost any form of entertainment we produce.
When you hear that, based on your experience,
Yeah.
what does that say to you?
It's quite a sobering thought, isn't it?
Right.
It makes me wonder if the platform, maybe unintentionally at first, tapped into something really deep, a human need, the desire to be seen, acknowledged. When you look at, say, the statistics around loneliness, disconnection, especially among men, it does raise questions. Are platforms like OnlyFans filling some kind of void, albeit in a very specific, maybe problematic way? The subscribers are mostly men. And the interactions, they often mimic relationship dynamics, intimacy, even if they are ultimately transactional. So for me, it points to a bigger societal conversation about connection and how these platforms kind of intersect with those needs. That's a really important point, that its success might be tangled up with these broader trends. Loneliness, the search for intimacy, adds a whole other layer beyond just, the explicit stuff.
Definitely.
So you joined this agency. Can you sort of paint a picture? What was it like inside? What was your role? And what did you start seeing?
Yeah, so initially, my role was pretty broad, helping set up the business, all the groundwork for a startup. We quickly figured out there were three main areas in the agency. Account management, that's the day-to-day stuff, talking to subscribers, managing content. Then marketing, which I was heavily involved in, trying to get creators visibility. And recruitment, bringing new creators on board.
And account management.
Yeah.
Why do creators need that?
Well, the idea is creators with a big social media following, they just can't handle the sheer volume of messages, the content requests on OnlyFans themselves. It's too much. So agencies step in, they handle the communication, the content schedule, promotions, all for a percentage of the creator's earnings.
Okay. And recruitment, how did that work?
When a woman joined, she'd fill out this really detailed questionnaire, covered everything, personal preferences, comfort levels, and that info fed into what we call the levels system.
Levels.
Yeah. Before even signing a contract, creators would say what they were comfortable with. Level 1 was like bikini, lingerie photos, stuff you might see on Instagram anyway. Level 2 was implied nudity. Level 3, full nudity. Level 4, everything but anal. And level 5 was, well, everything.
Wow. And looking back, you mentioned the psychological impact of that.
Yeah, I think it was significant. Now, someone might join with clear boundaries, right?
Yeah.
But seeing these defined levels, it created this subtle pressure, like maybe I should consider moving up, for more money. And interestingly, we actually found level 1 content just wasn't making enough profit.
So you got rid of it.
It got eliminated, yeah, which meant new creators were basically starting at implied nudity, even if they originally wanted to share less explicit stuff.
That really shows how the platform, the agencies, can kind of nudge creators towards more explicit content for financial reasons, potentially shifting their boundaries.
Exactly. The incentive structure points that way.
And who were the women joining? Was there like a typical profile?
No, not really. It was really diverse. Back in Australia, where maybe the legal, cultural context around sex work is a bit different, perhaps it's seen slightly differently there. But even in the U.S., I met women from all sorts of backgrounds, different ages. We had creators in their 30s, older even, and a whole range of financial situations. Some were already well off. Others were really struggling financially. There wasn't just one type of person.
That diversity really underlines how complex the motivations are. It's not just about money, right? Could be lots of factors. Connection, maybe that idea of empowerment we talked about.
Yeah, a whole mix of things driving people.
You mentioned recruitment tactics earlier. What did that involve? And did you start to see any, concerning trends, darker stuff emerging?
Yeah, the recruitment side. That's where some of the more ethically tricky things can pop up, especially with younger people. Well, a key factor for success was often having a niche, specific fetishes, willingness to do custom requests. But a really disturbing trend we saw was this apparent preference for younger-looking creators.
Oh, wow.
And that connects to something I found really worrying. These content houses or creator collectives, like the Bop House in LA. These are often shared houses where young women, some presenting in a very youthful, almost childlike way, they make content for TikTok, Instagram, whatever, to drive traffic to their OnlyFans pages.
So the TikToks aren't the final product. They're ads, basically.
Exactly. And what's really troubling is this seems to have become a recruitment strategy itself. I've heard from mothers whose young daughters now look up to these girls, aspire to that lifestyle. Heard stories from a high school in California, young girls planning to move into these houses the second they turn 18.
Like a feeder system.
It feels like it, yeah.
Okay.
And around the time I was in the agency, some of the top search terms in online porn, they included teen, fresh teen, belly legal.
That's deeply unsettling.
It was shocking, really disturbing.
Yeah. And it paints such a different picture from that narrative of easy money and financial freedom, because the reality is most OnlyFans creators aren't getting rich, are they?
Not at all, no.
Yeah.
The average monthly earnings, it's surprisingly low, around $180.
$180 a month
That's
average.
Yeah. I mean, in 2022, there were over 2 million creators, but only a tiny fraction, like 300 of them, made over $1 million that year.
That's tiny.
It is. To make real money, you typically need a huge existing following from somewhere else, Instagram, TikTok, and you need a constant stream of content, often very explicit content. Plus, a lot of creators maybe don't fully grasp how hard it is to completely erase that content once it's out there. That digital footprint, it
Yeah.
lasts.
That permanence online, digital privacy, huge considerations, and maybe not always clear at the start.
Definitely not.
So, being so deep in this world, what was the turning point for you? What made you realize, okay, something about this feels fundamentally wrong?
Well, as my role changed, I started managing the whole creator life cycle,
Right.
which meant I was seeing all the content being made, often by women I knew personally, women I'd built relationships with.
Right.
And there was this real disconnect. Many of them were smart, capable women. They had their own values, aspirations. And I'd see the content they were making, stuff that felt degrading, demeaning. It just didn't line up with who I knew them to be. It felt deeply wrong.
Did you talk about it with others there?
Yeah, I tried.
Mm.
When I raised concerns, the justifications I heard,
Mm-hmm.
they just felt thin, inadequate. People comparing it to like harm reduction strategies in other areas like safe injecting rooms. It didn't sit right. And personally, despite the surface stuff, the parties, the money, the supposed glamour, I just felt increasingly miserable. I tried to rationalize it for a while, thinking, oh, I can offset the bad by doing good elsewhere, like helping refugees. Sounds naive now, looking back. Then, almost out of nowhere, I felt this pull to go back to church. I hadn't been since I was a kid. It's a weird series of events, actually. Met a young adults pastor by chance. She listened to my story, no judgment, invited me back. So the next Sunday, I went, and the guest speaker. He talked about the over-sexualized culture, the potential harms of platforms like OnlyFans, especially for young people. And he said something like, communities of faith are meant to be salt and light, a positive influence, and maybe they haven't been effective enough in this area.
And that hit you.
It resonated so deeply, like a switch flipped. I just knew right then what I was involved in was wrong. For me, it was wrong. I talked to the speaker afterwards, and that started this period of huge personal reflection. I decided to leave the agency really quickly after that, got baptized soon after. It was a complete turnaround.
That's a really powerful story. Wow. And it brings us to the impact on the users, the subscribers. We heard earlier a big chunk, maybe 90%, are reportedly married men. What kind of dynamic do you think is playing out there?
Well, this often ties into that girlfriend experience idea we touched on.
Right.
To handle the sheer volume of messages, many creators, or really the agencies managing their accounts, they use chatters.
Chatters.
Yeah. These are often people based in countries with lower labor costs, like the Philippines, paid very little per hour, maybe. And they might be managing multiple creator accounts at once, engaging in text-based sexing with subscribers for like 12, 14 hours a day.
So it's not even the creator talking.
Often not. These chatters are trained how to create that illusion of personal connection, feign interest, build rapport, all with the goal of maximizing the subscriber's spending. Get them to buy more pay-per-view so the subscriber thinks they're having this intimate chat with the creator they follow. But the reality can be totally different, someone else entirely.
Wow. That completely shatters the idea of a genuine connection. The manufactured intimacy quote comes back.
Exactly. It exposes how manufactured that intimacy often is. Big disconnect between perception and reality for the user.
Definitely. So, having seen all this from the inside, what do you see as the broader consequences, the ethical issues around OnlyFans and platforms like it?
Well, I think in many ways, these platforms can exploit that fundamental human desire. We talked about connection, validation,
Right.
but in a transactional way. We heard stories, creators feeling their only worth is being hot. I remember one woman I worked with, she felt trapped, didn't think she had any other skills people would pay for.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. And another former creator I know, she started a successful new business, totally different field, only to have her old OnlyFans stuff surface sent to her new clients, impacting her reputation now. And while some argue, it's a safer alternative to traditional sex work, I see parallels between the manipulation used by some agencies, the content houses influencing young girls, the pressure to level up content, parallels between that and the coercion used by traffickers, just in a digital space.
So digital versus physical exploitation, you don't see a fundamental difference.
The emotional, psychological impact, it can be just as significant.
Yeah.
The recruitment tactics, the manipulation, it feels very similar to me.
That's a powerful comparison, challenging the idea that just because it's online, it's somehow less harmful.
Right.
What kind of reactions have you gotten since you started speaking out more, sharing your perspective?
Oh, it's been a real mix, definitely. Some people accuse me of, not being a girl's girl, not supporting other women, being judgmental. Others have that viewpoint of, just let people do what they want. But I often think, if we really believe that, where do we draw the line?
Yeah.
anywhere. Just unfettered freedom with no thought for consequences. Seems problematic.
Yeah.
And I also see that parallel. The commission these platforms and agencies take, it's like the percentage a pimp might take. Even if creators feel they have agency, a big chunk of their money's going elsewhere.
Yeah.
It makes you question how much control they really have.
Right. The power dynamic isn't simple.
No.
Yeah.
And I do worry about the wider impact. Potential desensitization, maybe. A blurring of ethical lines in society.
The varied responses really highlight how divisive this is. Conflicting views on sex work, online platforms, your points on agency, societal impact, they're crucial.
Yeah, lots to unpack there.
What about those who might argue, maybe harshly, that people on the platform are just getting what they deserve, or those who frame it all as sexual liberation? Where do you see the flaws in those arguments?
The they deserve it camp. For me, that just lacks empathy. Simple as that. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone deserves understanding, deserves grace. I mean, look at my own past involvement. I see my own missteps. Why would anyone else be less deserving of compassion?
Good point.
And as for the sexual revolution argument, it often seems to just ignore or really downplay the potential downsides.
Yeah.
The emptiness that can come from hookup culture, the desensitization, the actual, sometimes really damaging experiences people have in this industry. It's not always empowering. Sometimes it's really, really not.
Right. It's crucial to look beyond simple labels and see the actual human experiences, the potential consequences in this, well, hypersexualized digital world.
Absolutely.
So, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts on all this?
I think, ultimately, a lot of what happens on OnlyFans reflects a very transactional view of intimacy, connection. It feels like we've maybe lost a deeper understanding of what true intimacy really means, how important it is. And unless we start having more open, honest conversations about these issues, their consequences, individually and societally, we'll just keep seeing these patterns repeat. And, you know, for people who come from a faith perspective, I really believe there's a need to be more vocal, more engaged, to be a positive guiding influence in what's a really challenging landscape.
That's a compelling call to action. Reconsidering intimacy, encouraging open dialogue about the ethics, the societal impact, really important.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your invaluable firsthand experience, your insights with us today. It's truly been eye-opening and thought-provoking.
Thank you for having me. It's important to talk about this.
Your journey, your willingness to share, it's incredibly impactful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So for you, the listener, some key takeaways from our deep dive today. That huge contrast between the often glamorous perception of OnlyFans and the, well, sometimes harsh realities for creators and users.
Yeah, the perception versus reality gap is massive.
The really important ethical questions around exploitation, that manufactured connection we talked about, and just the very real human impact these platforms have.
Definitely.
If you want to explore this more, connect with our guest today. Definitely check out her podcast, Creating Gems, and her Instagram. We'll make sure all the links are available for you.
And maybe, as you reflect on this conversation, think about the longer-term consequences, societal, personal. What does this increasingly hypersexualized digital world mean for our relationships, our understanding of intimacy, the values shaping our culture?
Yeah, it's a conversation that definitely needs to continue.